Actually, the bride can't have children, and I've always been against the marriage. But my son insisted, so I had no choice. In the middle of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law, standing on the stage to deliver her speech, blurted out something shocking. She boldly declared my infertility in front of all the attendees. Well, as you can see, the bride is a barren failure. But she's a career woman, and she earns well, so I reluctantly accepted the marriage. I was left speechless by her audacity. How could she label a woman who can't have children a failure and shame her in front of everyone? In the middle of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law, standing on the stage to deliver her speech, blurted out something shocking. The wedding hall fell silent at the unexpected insult from the mother-in-law. My name is Catherine. I'm a 31-year-old office worker at a well-known company. I belong to the glamorous department of product development, where I'm responsible for planning new products. I've been involved in several hit products so far, and I find my job very fulfilling. Though I'm content with my work and happy, I have a secret I can't tell anyone. That is, I'm infertile. I found out 5 years ago that I can't have children. I remember feeling shocked and devastated at the time. I felt worthless, and I lost hope for the future. In fact, the boyfriend I was dating at the time ended up breaking up with me. Being overwhelmed by sadness and frustration, the only thing that could uplift me was my job. I worked hard so I wouldn't have time to dwell on unnecessary thoughts. Looking back, I think I was avoiding reality. But thanks to my hard work, a product I was deeply involved in became a big hit, and my evaluation at work improved. Since I couldn't have children, I thought I had no choice but to give up on marriage. I was convinced that contributing to society through work was the only path I had in life. But then, an unexpected encounter came my way. At a meeting for product development, I met a man my age from a client company. This man changed my fate. His name is David, he's the son of the president of the client company, and he's the head of the planning department. David and I exchanged contact information right away. Initially, we only communicated for work, but gradually our private exchanges increased. Eventually, we started dating, and it turned into a relationship. I thought I could never fall in love again, so meeting him felt like a miracle. David is a very kind and devoted man. And to such a man, I couldn't bring myself to reveal my secret. If David found out that I was infertile, he would surely leave me. I was scared at the thought. But I couldn't keep secrets from David, who treated me with sincerity. I didn't know what would happen, but I decided to be honest about my body. I made up my mind and told David that I was infertile. He'll leave me. I thought it was possible. Despite being resolved, I was anxious. But when I gathered the courage to talk, he started to cry after hearing it. He comforted me saying, "It must have been tough. Thank you for telling me." His kindness made me cry, and I remember it like it was yesterday. In the end, the breakup I feared did not come, and my relationship with David continued smoothly from that day. On our second anniversary, David celebrated at a restaurant. He opened a small case in front of me, revealing a ring, and then he spoke. "Catherine, I want you to marry me." It was an unexpected proposal. My heart pounded with joy. But I also felt a wave of anxiety. "David, are you sure about me? I can't have a baby. We can't have our own child. Are you still okay with that?" Even though David understands my situation, the weight of marriage is something different. I couldn't immediately say yes to his proposal. "Yeah, it doesn't matter. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Catherine. Even when things get tough, even when we're sad, I want us to live through it all together." David reassured me, taking my anxiety into account. At that moment, I might have shed a lifetime's worth of tears. Since the day I was diagnosed as infertile, I had never dreamt that this day would come. I knew then that I could face anything as long as I was with him. I accepted his proposal, certain of my feelings. I want to live my life with you too, David. Thank you for always caring for me. I look forward to our future together. And so, we quickly began preparations for our wedding. I was already past 30. I was eager to become a wife, to officially join our lives together as soon as possible. It's funny how much you want to rush things once a proposal is on the table. Now that marriage was becoming a reality, I felt it all the more. But before anything else, we had to meet David's parents. We had met them a few times before, but we hadn't really had a proper conversation. We set a date to meet and tell them about our engagement. But the news of our marriage did not go smoothly. While his father was very happy, his mother kept a stern face throughout. And then, "Catherine, I can't accept that you're going to marry David." She expressed her opposition to our marriage. "Why?" Before I could speak, David questioned his mother. As she continued to glare at me, she explained her reason. "You can't have children, right? That means we won't have any grandchildren, doesn't it? Our only son David can't have a child. Is there anything worse?" She brought up the very thing I didn't want to be confronted with. I was prepared to face blame for being infertile, but hearing it said outright really hurt. Her words left me without a reply. "You understand, right? David is set to become the next president of the company. It's only natural that we expect his wife to produce an heir. Marrying someone who can't do that, I won't allow it." She continued to deny our marriage in a forceful tone. I was fully aware that David was the future head of the company, and I understood that his parents would want him to have a child soon. But David proposed to me, knowing all this. Not being able to have a child with David is painful for me too. Even though we chose to get married knowing all of this, her words were too harsh. "I'm the one who said it didn't matter." David jumped in, defending me against his mother. "Stop blaming Catherine. Don't trample over our decisions like this." David spoke up for me when I was lost for words. His dad was also angry at his mom, saying, "How can you say such a thing?" But no matter what anyone said, his mother remained unmoved, her expression unchanged. "I'm not saying anything wrong," she declared, before leaving the table, indicating she had no more to discuss. In the end, our conversation that day didn't lead to any resolution. Still, it didn't change our firm decision to get married. We took the plunge and registered our marriage, with his father's approval. We knew if we waited for her approval, we might never get married. "It doesn't matter if my mom is against it," David reassured me. "I'm the one who wanted to get married. Let's just wait for her to eventually give in." And so, David and I became husband and wife. Yet, even after that, his mother refused to acknowledge our marriage. "I will never accept this. I won't even attend the wedding," she said, pushing it even further. Because of this, we decided to put off the wedding ceremony. We still hoped to have her acceptance before we celebrated our union. Day after day, his father tried to persuade her, and both David and I continued to appeal to her, pouring our hearts into every plea. But she remained stubborn and refused to give in. Eventually, even my parents visited his parents' house several times to try and talk her down. Even some of David's relatives suggested she accept our marriage. Finally, after all these earnest appeals from everyone around her, she relented. At last, we could proceed with the wedding ceremony. She still seemed discontented, but David and I began our preparations, and finally set a date for our wedding. It was a year from the day we registered our marriage, essentially, our first wedding anniversary. When our wedding day was finally set, David and I felt relieved. And before we knew it, the day of our wedding arrived. I was deeply touched, filled with joy that we were finally celebrating this day. I was finally able to wear the wedding dress that I had almost given up on. It felt like a dream come true. The wedding ceremony went smoothly at the church, and the reception began. Surrounded by the blessings of many attendees, I was overflowing with happiness. I owe it all to David, who stood by my side and led me here, even when I was feeling defeated and thought I wasn't worthy of marriage. I couldn't thank him enough. Seeing David, all dressed up and looking so gallant and dependable, made me so happy. As the reception proceeded and we were about to retreat for a costume change, I noticed his mother taking the stage. It looked like she had asked the MC for permission to say a few words to the attendees. And so, she started her speech on her own. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my son's wedding today. The truth is, the bride can't have children, and I've been against their marriage all along. I was about to leave my seat to change, but her words made me freeze on the spot. She had just mentioned something that shouldn't be said, especially not here at our joyful wedding celebration. The lively atmosphere in the venue quickly hushed to a silence. But my son was insistent, so I gave in and accepted their marriage. In the dead silent hall, mother-in-law's voice was the only one echoing. Frozen in place, I watched as David tried to approach mother-in-law and snatch the microphone. "Mom, can you stop this?" But David's attempts were smoothly evaded by mother-in-law, who wouldn't be stopped. Holding on to the microphone tightly so as not to lose it, she continued to address the attendees. "You see, I will never be able to hold a grandchild in my life. Can you believe such a dreadful story? Really, I don't understand why he chose a woman like this." I was flabbergasted by the barrage of harsh words. Beside me, David was struggling to contain his anger towards his mother's unhinged outburst. Then, mother-in-law dropped the bombshell. "Well, as you can see, my daughter-in-law is a barren failure. But she's quite the career woman and makes good money. So, I begrudgingly accepted their marriage." Mother-in-law chuckled loudly at her own words. She then looked at me and added one final jab. "You should be grateful. It's thanks to me that you're having this day." With that, mother-in-law, appearing pleased, returned to her seat, having finished her utterly disgraceful speech. Had there ever been a more offensive speech? I was too stunned to even hear the voices around me. Urged by David and the venue staff, I was led out of the hall with my mind a blur. Once inside the dressing room, all the suppressed emotions came crashing in. Anger, sadness, the sense of loss from having our anticipated ceremony ruined. I was overwhelmed by my distaste for everything. I never wanted to see mother-in-law's face again. I didn't want to return to a venue where such a person was present. As I was changing out of my current dress for the next one, I refused to put on the next dress and changed into my own clothes instead. "I've had enough. I'm going home," I told David and ran out of the dressing room, towards the entrance of the venue. "Catherine, wait a minute." Ignoring David's attempts to stop me, I jumped into a taxi that was parked at the entrance. I asked the driver to take me home. Having been humiliated by mother-in-law in front of everyone at the reception, I couldn't contain my anger. I wanted to escape from there as quickly as possible. Our new home, where David and I had just started living, was a short 5-minute drive from the wedding venue. Upon entering our home, the tears I had been holding back flowed freely. I never dreamed that I would be treated so cruelly in front of a crowd on my wedding day. My happiness from yesterday had instantly turned into the worst despair. It's not like I chose to be infertile. And to expose that in front of so many people. Especially on a day like this. Thoughts were racing through my head. While I was wiping away my tears, David arrived. "Catherine, I'm truly sorry. Please, forgive me. I never imagined my mother would say such horrible things. I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything for you." David bowed deeply to me, offering words of apology. He explained that as the groom, he couldn't afford to raise his voice against his mother's antics. I knew very well that David was a decent person. And besides, mother-in-law was the one at fault here. I didn't feel like blaming him at all. "Please, Catherine, let's go back to the wedding. I told my dad to keep my mom out of the venue. They're in the middle of a dress change and it's a mingling time for the guests. We can still make it back in time. I don't want our reception to end in shambles like this. Please, let's go back together." I nodded at David's plea. I decided to trust him and return to the wedding. I didn't want to cause any more pain for him, my supporter and my understanding companion. Moreover, I was reluctant to ruin the reception we had both painstakingly prepared for. Apologizing to David for rushing back home in a huff, we made our way back to the venue. In the taxi, we held hands, promising to see our wedding reception through to the end. Once we returned and entered the family waiting room, we found my mother-in-law surrounded by relatives. It was clear from her exhausted expression that she had been heavily reprimanded. Seeing my face, mother-in-law approached me. "Oh, Catherine, I'm so sorry. Can we just pretend that earlier incident never happened?" She lowered her head slightly towards me, pleading for forgiveness in a childish voice. It was a complete turnaround from the smug face she had displayed at the reception. "What? How could you even suggest that, after the humiliation you caused in front of so many people? How can you say let's just forget it all happened?" My anger resurfaced at mother-in-law's insolent behavior. The audacity of asking for forgiveness after what she had done was beyond my comprehension. Why was she seeking forgiveness in the first place when she didn't even want to accept me? She could have just left things as they were if she disliked it so much. I expressed my unwillingness to forgive her to mother-in-law and started preparing to get back to the ceremony. "Don't be like that. I'm apologizing, so won't you forgive me? I had no idea that one of your relatives was a key client of our company. My maternal uncle, as it turns out, runs a significant client of my father-in-law's company. Apparently, while I was away, he had given mother-in-law a serious dressing down. He had even hinted at stopping the business transaction. Thanks to my father-in-law's desperate apologies, the situation was barely kept under control. I immediately understood why mother-in-law was apologizing. It wasn't out of guilt or regret towards me, but for her own self-preservation. I was so astounded that I was lost for words. It was then that David, who had been silently watching our exchange, finally spoke up. "Mom, is that your idea of an apology? Aren't you disrespecting Catherine too much? And you're apologizing to her just because you were scolded by a client?" Mother-in-law looked blankly at David, who had raised his voice suddenly. It was rare for him to lose his temper like this, as he was typically calm and collected. It was understandable that mother-in-law was taken aback. "Do you even understand how much you hurt Catherine, Mom? You made light of her most sensitive issue in front of everyone at our wedding. As a person, that's the worst thing you could do. No matter the reason, it's unforgivable to casually bring up someone's health issues like that." David didn't hold back, continuing to shout at mother-in-law. He let out all the pent-up feelings he had towards his own mother. He had witnessed firsthand how mother-in-law had hurt me time and time again, using my infertility as a weapon. The worst of it all was her outrageous behavior at today's reception. David's gaze upon his mother was filled with disdain. I'm done with you. Consider yourself without a son. If you can't accept Catherine as my wife, that's your problem. What you say doesn't affect us. Our mother-in-law doesn't concern outsiders. A complete disavowal. David finally laid it out for his mother-in-law. He declared he had no intention of associating with her from here on out. As far as he was concerned, he had no mother. That's what I told mother-in-law. David, don't say things like that. I really want to celebrate you. Don't be angry, okay? I won't say anything more. Let's lift the mood and enjoy the wedding, shall we? His mother-in-law turned a sickly pale at David's words. In a fluster, she tried to gauge his mood. However, there was nothing she could say now that would make David listen. Today's not only about me, it's about Catherine, too. We're a team, we're one. Looking down on Catherine is just like looking down on me. I get it, you don't want to celebrate us. So just leave now. Get out. Her apologies were nothing more than self-preservation. There was no sincerity towards me. David told her mercilessly to get out. He told her that I was his only family. I can't believe this, David. Upon hearing David's words, his mother stood there, dumbfounded. It seemed she hadn't expected such clear repulsion from her son. A cold gaze was cast upon her by David, me, David's father, and the rest of the relatives. Having lost all allies and standing alone, she finally accepted the reality. Her only option was to leave the scene. After she had gone, I quickly changed my dress, took David's hand, and we returned to the venue hand in hand. Guests, who were oblivious to the turmoil that had occurred. Although we had kept them waiting for a considerable length of time, they welcomed us back with a round of applause. It seems everyone had sensed the situation and kindly waited for us. I was truly grateful for this warm atmosphere. And the wedding reception, now devoid of my mother-in-law, proceeded smoothly, with David and I preparing to give our final speech. We made sure to apologize sincerely for the disruption caused by my mother-in-law. And so, we managed to conclude our reception without further ado. Following this, true to David's declaration, we decided to completely distance ourselves from my mother-in-law. David changed his contact information, making sure no communication came through from her. He even proposed that we move homes, even though we'd just settled into our new one. Realizing David's firm intent to sever all ties with mother-in-law, I agreed to the move. The moving expenses were covered by my father-in-law, citing the troubles caused by my mother-in-law, and we promptly relocated to our new home. After ensuring our move was complete, father-in-law took the opportunity to serve mother-in-law with divorce papers. Father-in-law, too, had long harbored resentment toward mother-in-law's behavior towards me, and the incident at the wedding was the final straw. While a sincere apology ensured that our uncle, who was also a business associate, did not sever ties with us, he was completely fed up with mother-in-law. Mother-in-law was expelled from her family home, forced to embark on a lonely new life. Since David and I have no involvement, we have no idea about mother-in-law's whereabouts or her current state. Rumors suggest that due to the disgraceful display at the wedding, no family members are willing to aid her, and she is living a lonely, harsh life. Apparently, she's residing in a budget apartment, barely making ends meet by working part-time jobs from morning till night. On the other hand, David and I are enjoying a harmonious married life. We have no children. But, even without the blessing of children, we can live together for the rest of our lives. As long as we continue to respect and grow with each other every day, we can always be happy. David and I believe this, as we join hands and face our future together. Our hopes spread toward the future we are building together. When I received the handset handed to me, A man on the other end claimed to be a police officer. Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair. We would like to speak with you about it. Can you come to the hospital urgently? I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered. My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately. I inquired about the hospital to which he was transported, and despite being in the middle of a meeting, I explained the situation, obtained permission from my boss, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and my husband, Ben, were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted, "It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair! Wait a minute! What are you talking about?" I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? After all, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, Ben raised his voice. "Because of what you did, I want a divorce. And for fair compensation. $30,000. Wait a minute. Why would?" My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed. "Can we discuss the details at the police station?" The officer stated firmly, urging me to accompany them. Despite explaining multiple times at the police station that I had been at work, the misunderstanding continued, increasing my anxiety. Then, an unexpected person showed up. It was Emma, the chief of Ben's shop. "My name is Anne, 43 years old. I work for a company related to health food. Mainly dealing with beauty supplements, I'm busy running around the sales office with my team for new product proposals. My husband, Ben, who is 2 years my senior, runs a beauty salon on his own, thankfully never short of customers. We met when we were both students, working part-time at the same pub. One time, he protected me from a drunk customer, which started our conversation. From there, we hit it off over shared interests in beauty, and while I was swayed by Ben's assertive nature, I was also drawn to his reliability in times of need and married him a few years later. By then, we were both working professionals. Ben had finished vocational school and was apprenticing at a salon, and I had settled into my job at the current company. I chose to continue working even after marriage. Partly because Ben's income as a hairstylist alone was not enough for both of us to live on, but also because I wanted to build my career. We decided not to have children, opting instead to dedicate our time to work and hobbies. A decision that often surprises our friends, though neither Ben nor I mind. We believe in each having our own form of family. My work schedule varies, with some days ending at regular hours and others requiring overtime. As for holidays, I usually have weekends and public holidays off. Ben generally returns home around the same time each day, but has irregular holidays due to shift work. Hence, our homecoming times and days off vary. But we're both content living our lives, enjoying our hobbies. I'm into bodybuilding, often spending my free time at the gym. Protein supplements are a staple at home, and drinking them after gym sessions has become a routine, also serving as a chance to test our products. Ben's hobby is working on and touring with his motorcycle. There's a small garage behind our house where his prized large motorcycle is kept. He's been passionate about bikes since before we met, collecting tools, parts, and even antique components. Once, he said, "I'm worried about the bike because a typhoon is hitting us directly," and spent the night in the garage in a sleeping bag, worried about his newly changed tires getting damaged. "Hey, it's dangerous. Why don't you come inside?" "I'm more worried about the bike than myself." I can't sleep thinking about it getting damaged." His serious tone left me utterly dumbfounded, and I couldn't say anything more. However, about 2 months ago, Ben had an accident while riding with his touring group and broke his leg. I was off that day and shocked when I received the call from the hospital. Seeing him in a wheelchair with a broken right leg, I asked, "Are you okay? Are you planning to close the shop?" "If we close, Emma would be in trouble. Of course, we'll keep the shop open." Emma has been working at Ben's beauty salon since its opening. She is entrusted with the role of chief and is popular with customers due to her brisk and friendly nature. "Really? But how will you get to work? The house and the shop are a bit far apart. You always said it takes you about 20 minutes to walk, right? I have work too, so it's difficult for me to drive you. The shop opens at 10 a.m., but I leave the house by 8 a.m. It's extremely dangerous for him to go that distance in a wheelchair by himself, considering it takes 20 minutes on foot without a fracture." "Yeah, that's true. I can't drive a car either, so I'll discuss it with Emma." Later, Ben and Emma talked it over, and it was decided that Emma would drive him. I complained about her having to leave her house earlier because of this, but Ben said it was Emma who offered to do the driving. "She said she's the owner's right arm and got all excited about it." Though he seemed a bit troubled saying it, Ben didn't seem entirely displeased either. "I'm too busy to meddle in the shop's affairs, but I can't help feeling astonished at my husband's situation. For the past 2 months, we've relied on her for Ben's transportation, feeling both guilty and grateful. Once, when I visited the shop because I needed to talk to Ben, I had a conversation with Emma, who seems to be actively taking hair supplements. I occasionally bring our company's hair supplements as a token of appreciation, always thanking her." "Emma, are you sure it's not too much of a burden? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm tough, so this is nothing for me." "I'm sorry, it just feels like—" "Don't worry about it. By the way, the supplement you brought last time was amazing. I even shared some with my friends and recommended it." Her always cheerful demeanor somehow felt reassuring. I'm proud that such a bright and wonderful girl is the face of this beauty salon. "Actually, I have a business trip coming up, but could you cut my hair before I leave?" "Just a trim is fine." "Where are you going?" "I'm expecting souvenirs, you know." She joked as she pulled out the appointment book from behind the counter and flipped to the reservation page. "It's nothing special." I laughed along as I chose an available date and time. "Then I'll see you in a week." "Yes, please." The week flew by, and on the day I was to cut Emma's hair, I stopped by the shop during a break from work, just as the previous customer, a woman in her 50s with a soft bob and light perm, was leaving. The woman walked out briskly, looking youthful. Emma, who was behind the counter, watched her leave, then looked down to write something in the appointment book. As I entered, she looked up and momentarily appeared awkward, but quickly returned to her usual smile. "Hello. Could you wait just a moment? I'll be ready in no time." She said this and quickly cleaned up the hair on the floor and sanitized the chair, finishing everything in about 3 minutes. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, have a seat here." I sat down in the indicated chair and looked at myself in the mirror. I hadn't had a haircut in a while and looked quite aged. "How careless can I get?" To my spontaneous remark, Emma laughed. "Not at all. You just want a trim today, right?" "That's right. I'm thinking of growing it out to try this style next." I tapped my phone, showing her a hair catalog webpage, and pointed to a photo of a shoulder-length hairstyle. "Do you think it would suit me?" "It'll look great. You have a bit of a wave in the back here, so we'll make sure to cover that. It'll suit you perfectly. Emma gestured. You'll look fantastic. Let's do it, and exclaimed over the mirror. Even though the shop played calming music box tunes and maintained a peaceful atmosphere, something felt off, like a mix of unease beneath Emma's steady hands and expressions. Maybe it was intuition. Despite the ordinary setting with music box tunes, Emma's expressions, the sound of scissors, and our chat, something seemed different. Since it was just a trim, the haircut was finished quicker than usual, and I paid before leaving. I decided to head home immediately due to my next appointment, but as she saw me off, I couldn't help but notice she seemed a bit down. I impulsively asked her, Emma, are you tired? Are you getting enough rest? Not at all. Do I have dark circles? I've been watching dramas late into the night recently. She laughed off, making me second-guess my concern. If you're feeling good, then that's great. Thanks for today. Good luck on your business trip. I waved back at her encouragement and left the shop. That night, as I looked up at the beautiful full moon on my way home, I found Ben had unusually come home before me. I was a bit surprised as I put down my things and started preparing dinner. Hey, I got a haircut from Emma today. What do you think? Ben looked up from his motorcycle magazine and said, It doesn't seem much different. Can't you say something nice like it suits me? I just got it trimmed today. Thought I should groom myself once in a while. I retorted, to which Ben scoffed. We're both in our 40s, what's there to suit or not? His comment, whether a joke or his real thoughts, was followed by him returning to his magazine. Lately, or maybe for a few years now, I've felt Ben being somewhat cold towards me. I remember how he used to praise me for even a small haircut, saying I looked beautiful, and wonder if we were just younger back then. Speaking of today, I was a bit worried about Emma. She seemed a bit down. She said she was fine, but I wonder if something is burdening her. Suddenly, Ben became visibly annoyed and said, Are you saying you don't like her driving me around? That's not what I said. I'm just worried about Emma. Then don't worry. I know her well enough. Don't meddle in the shop's affairs. Sorry, no need to get so mad. After dinner, Ben and I ate, and I decided to go to bed early to prepare for tomorrow's business trip. The next day, I left home early in the morning and took the train. I had a meeting with a client and then another meeting at the head office, planning to spend a busy day before staying overnight at a hotel and returning early the next morning by train. Sitting on the train, I opened my planner to check my schedule for the day, realizing I had meetings from morning till evening. This is going to be a headache, I murmured while eating a sandwich I had bought earlier. Though business trips aren't frequent, I thought it was nice to have a taste of travel now and then. Arriving at my destination, the cool autumn breeze felt refreshing as I stood on the platform. It was a nice start to the day. My office has 3 meeting rooms, and the largest one was where the meeting began. It was still morning when I started feeling a bit sleepy. The door opened, and a clerk looked around, spotted me, and came over with a phone handset. For me? As I took the handset, a man on the other end identified himself as a police officer. Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair. Can you come to the hospital urgently? I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered. My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately. I found out which hospital he was taken to, explained the situation to my boss during the meeting, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and Ben were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted, "It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair! Wait a minute! What are you talking about?" I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? Besides, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, a young-looking officer confirmed with Ben. "Is it really her?" "Yes, that's her. I saw it with my own eyes. Anne, I never dreamed you would do such a thing. You've been timing this, haven't you?" "What are you talking about? There's no way I would do that." "Because you did this, I'm getting a divorce. And prepare the compensation. $30,000. Wait a minute. Why would? My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed. One of the 2 police officers, a bigger-built man, turned to me and asked where I was about an hour ago when Ben fell, and if I was with anyone. I answered with a shaky voice, "I was in a meeting at work at that time," honestly telling them, "Please believe me." Indeed, they had called my workplace. Since I was attending a meeting, both my boss and colleagues could vouch for me. It should be clear to them that I wasn't the perpetrator once they verify with them. The younger-looking officer began. "Is that so? But we'll need to hear the details at the police station," he said with a scoff, implying disbelief, and I was taken into custody. "If you check with my workplace, it'll all be clear." "Of course, we'll do that, but this is a hospital, not a place for interrogation. And currently, we also have to consider the possibility of attempted murder on your husband," the officer stated clearly, urging me to accompany them. Reluctantly, I followed them and informed my workplace that I wouldn't be able to return today, heading to the police station. As I was leaving the room, I saw Ben smiling broadly, looking satisfied as if everything was settled. And I didn't miss the sound of him making a call as I stepped into the hallway. At the police station, I kept repeating the same thing. "So, I was at work at that time. You know my workplace's number, right?" I mustered up the courage to reiterate that I had an alibi, asking them to verify with my company. However, they were reluctant to release me, and my anxiety grew. What would be my motive? Why would I push Ben's wheelchair? Could be for the insurance money, or to have all the property to yourself. I would never do something this stupid just for that. No matter what I said, the police officer wouldn't believe me, and the clock's hands just kept moving forward meaninglessly. After a while, suddenly, Emma came to visit me at the police station. A woman in her 50s who looked a lot like her was with her. Apparently, this was Emma's mother. "I'm really sorry for coming out of the blue. And I'm really sorry." Unlike the usual Emma, she began to apologize abruptly with a face that looked like she was about to cry. I was so surprised that I couldn't even speak. "I just got a call from the owner, hearing that you were taken by the police. I consulted with Mom. We came here to clear name and claim your innocence." "What do you mean?" Then Emma started explaining everything, which roughly went like this. Emma had started dating Ben a few years ago and gradually fell for him. Ben, too, became serious about his relationship with Emma, saying, "I'll divorce and eventually, so please wait for me." However, even after 2 or 3 years, there was no progress, and Ben showed no signs of divorcing, so Emma told him they should break up and she would quit the shop, to which he replied yesterday. "I've thought of a good method," he said. "A good method?" "Yes. That's about today's incident." The plan was to first make his wheelchair fall in a ditch on a deserted roadside, claim to the police and the ambulance that someone had made him fall. And when I arrived, and is the criminal, he would tell the police, and in my confusion, demand a divorce and compensation. Of course, I was against it because it was impossible, but the owner said you were weak to pressure, so it would be fine. Moreover, after the divorce, we could get married and use the compensation money for a trip. I felt dizzy. In other words, Ben was staging a self-directed drama involving the police and hospital to divorce me. This even surprised the young police officer who was listening by my side. It's originally my fault for having an affair with the owner. It's also my fault for not stopping the owner even though I knew about this plan. I've wrongfully accused you, and I'm truly sorry. I was shocked to have been cheated on, and indeed, I was dumbfounded. Somehow regaining my composure and facing Emma, I clearly and slowly told her, "Emma, I appreciate you telling me about Ben's plan. But what you did can't be easily forgiven. Do you understand that?" "Yes, I understand." Emma looked me in the eye and answered firmly. Indeed, she seemed like a tough girl. Afterward, the two police officers who had brought me in changed their expressions upon hearing Emma's testimony and went out to question Ben. And a few hours later, he was arrested for making false statements to the police and causing disorder in their operations. "Why has it come to this?" He was complaining when he came to the police station, but I thought it was his responsibility and didn't feel like defending him even when we were both being questioned. That day, I was the only one released, and I went home with Emma. Eventually, Ben avoided jail time by paying a fine, but in a small town, rumors spread quickly, and several regulars canceled their reservations. Customers decreased, and eventually, the shop had to close. Having lost his credibility, he couldn't find a job as a hairdresser in his hometown. As for me, I decided that I couldn't continue with someone who tried to frame me and immediately presented him with divorce papers to leave. Until the end, Ben refused to sign the divorce papers, saying, "You're all I have. Can't you reconsider the divorce?" He said that, but I coldly pointed out his affair with Emma. "You've been telling Emma for years that you'd divorce me, right? You really wanted to divorce, didn't you? Now is the time, isn't it?" Then Ben turned pale and said, "It's not like that. It's a misunderstanding." Thinking about it, maybe his relationship with Emma was just a game to him, but I couldn't help feeling a bit of sympathy for her. Afterward, Emma submitted her resignation to Ben, told him they were done, and moved to a different place right away. Between us, she stopped by my place just before moving to give me her new address. And I'm really sorry for the trouble I've caused. This is my new address. Please send the claim for the compensation here. She had prepared herself to do all this. Knowing how briskly and cheerfully she used to serve customers in the shop only made my heart ache more. I took the envelope Emma handed me. "Understood." I nodded. I wonder what she felt all these years being with me. I wanted to ask her something mean, but the thought was too frightening, and I never could bring myself to ask. "Emma, take care, okay?" That was all I could manage to say. Emma nodded with tearful eyes and left. I haven't seen her since then. As for Ben, by that time, we were separated, and he was living a part-time life alone. He persistently sent me messages updating me on his life, trying to evoke sympathy, but I continued to ignore those messages with a firm stance. Eventually, through a lawyer, the divorce with Ben was finalized, and I nearly ended up paying compensation, but instead, I was the one to receive it. It was exactly $30,000. Ben's debt ballooned as he struggled to pay this, ending up in financial trouble. He already had debts from closing the beauty salon and its procedures. Now, he started doing multiple part-time jobs to pay them off. Regarding Emma, the lawyer asked, "You could claim compensation from her as well. What would you like to do?" I was hesitant for a long time. Being betrayed was certainly a shock, and knowing that Ben grew cold towards me because of her made me angry. However, for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Maybe she, too, wanted the affair to be exposed somewhere deep down, having energetically worked as the shop's chief and supported Ben, and even during the moments at the police station and our farewell. Maybe she wanted to end the relationship but couldn't. This is just my speculation, and I know it sounds naive. But still, I felt it would be cruel to claim compensation from her, so I told the lawyer, "I won't claim anything from Emma. I'm grateful for her support of my husband's shop and for helping me at the police station." The lawyer, in a businesslike manner, merely replied, "Is that so?" and looked at another document. I received the compensation from my ex-husband and have since thrown myself into work and my hobby, bodybuilding, with renewed vigor. My bosses and colleagues were surprised by the divorce, but I wasn't pitted strangely and have been able to return to my calm daily life as before. It's been several weeks since the divorce chaos and compensation claim procedures. On a cool holiday morning and evening, while organizing my chest, the envelope with the new address given by Emma appeared. I had completely forgotten about it since finishing the conversation with the lawyer. "I don't need this anymore." I put strength into the middle of the envelope, tearing it in half, then tore it into smaller pieces and threw it away. I haven't been in touch with her since, but I wonder if she's still working as a hairstylist somewhere. Glancing at the mirror, I noticed my hair had grown longer since the last time she cut it. Thinking it was about time to get a haircut again, I tapped the screen of my mobile phone to search for a beauty salon.